Okay, so you guys see the title, but before you start typing the hate comments, just hear me out. This video does have a point, and it has a larger point, and I am not an Ace of Spades hater. In fact, I'm an Ace of Spades main. I have 5,600 kills on Ace, and that's a lot for me on a single weapon because I am someone who switches their loadouts a ton. Now, the reason I'm making this video is because the Destiny community, especially on the PvP side, PvE too, but more on the PvP side, has a real issue, and that is people in this game are not willing to admit when something is broken as long as it benefits them. This has been seen time and time again. We've seen it during the stasis meta, the pulse rifle meta, DMT meta, so on and so forth, the list goes on. And this is a real problem because while I don't think Destiny can ever be a truly balanced game because there's just too much going on in it, the goal should be to get it as close to being balanced as we can. But to do that, people have to be willing to admit when something is too strong, even if it benefits them. So, Ace of Spades, right? Probably the best overall exotic hand cannon in the game. Now, we are not currently in a hand cannon meta, but we will one day, eventually, and we're moving in that direction slowly again, I think. We will eventually be in a hand cannon meta again because they tend to be the most common. Now, Ace is probably the best overall exotic hand cannon because it has really the perfect balance of consistency and lethality. So the reason I'm talking about Ace is because when the day comes that we are back in a hand cannon meta, Ace will immediately become the next No Time to Explain, and I don't really want to see that happen to my favorite PvP weapon in the game. So in order to understand what exactly makes Ace of Spades so strong, we have to talk about what makes Ace of Spades so strong. And there's a number of things, but there's a couple specific things that people don't talk about enough with Ace, and we're going to discuss them. Now, first off, of course, the big thing, Memento Mori, its exotic perk. It's actually 2 perks in one. Reloading after a kill loads magazine with a few extra damage bullets, and Memento Mori also grants radar while aiming down sights. Now let me talk about the radar thing first because I don't see people talk about this enough, and it is one of the things that makes Ace of Spades so strong. Typically on a weapon, when you aim down sights, you lose your radar. But that's not the case with Ace of Spades. You will always have your radar regardless of if you're aiming down sights or not, and it cannot be understated how strong that is. Say you're in like 3v3, right? Comp, trials, whatever, a lot of times you'll get into some pretty drawn out gunfights, laning battles, so on and so forth. Gunfights where you could be spending a lot of time aiming down sights. With other weapons, when you lose your radar, that gives the enemy an opportunity to reposition, to flank, so on and so forth. And with other weapons, you lose your radar, but Ace, you don't. So Ace is going to let you know exactly what's going on the entire gunfight. If your opponent ducks behind cover, Ace will let you know if they're repositioning. It'll let you know if one of their buddies is trying to flank you. That is something that is invaluable inside of PvP, especially in our 3v3 modes. Now the next thing is, of course, the extra damage rounds from getting a kill and reloading. First off, it's a very substantial damage boost. It will boost your damage up enough so that instead of having to land 3 crits, you can get away with 2 body, 1 crit. So that, of course, makes your gunfights very forgiving by itself, but if you can give Ace a little extra juice, such as from Radiant or Weapons of Light, then you will actually be able to 2-tap with it, at least on Guardians under a certain resilience. So the number of extra damage rounds it gives you are 6, which is nearly half the magazine, and Memento Mori is not on a timer. So unlike something like, say, Kill Clip or Thorn Perk, where you do have a timer, so when you get that damage bonus, you have to take advantage of that time. You have to push into your next gunfight pretty quickly in order to take advantage of the damage boost. You don't have to do that with Ace. Mori does not have a timer, so what that means is you're in a gunfight, you win, you reload, maybe you took some damage. Unlike, say, Kill Clip or Thorn Perk or a number of other damage perks out there, with Mori, you can back up, take a moment to breathe, check your radar, wait for your health to come back, and then push into your next gunfight. So that's another reason that Ace is very strong. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is Ace is one of the best weapons in the game for flinching people. This is one of the reasons I've been using Ace a lot in this meta when I use hand cannons. When I get into a battle against a pulse, submachine gun, whatever, something like that, the ability to flinch them off of me is incredibly valuable. Now, Ace flinches really hard for a couple of reasons. First off, in case you didn't know, the amount of flinch that you inflict on someone is directly linked to how much damage you do to them. So with Mori, you get a substantial damage boost, which will increase your flinch, and on top of that, Ace has high caliber rounds, which also increases your flinch. So this means if you tag someone a couple times with Ace while Mori is up, with the bonus of having Mori and high caliber rounds, you tap them a couple times and they're basically going to be looking at the ceiling. So this overall makes Ace a very forgiving weapon and an extremely lethal weapon. This is the best overall exotic hand cannon in the game. Yes, there are others that may be more lethal, such as Hawkmoon or potentially Thorn, but because Mori is not on a timer, because Ace flinches so hard, as a whole, it's going to be more consistent than those weapons. So all that combined, it means that when we are inevitably back in a hand cannon meta, Ace will immediately become the single best hand cannon in the game. And I don't mean by a small margin. By a very significant one, Ace will be the best hand cannon in the game, no question. It's also worth noting that Ace's base stats are also very good. We have 85 range, stability and handling are a little bit lacking, but when you have Mori procced, you don't have to worry as much about how many crits you land, so stability isn't as big of an issue. Reload speed is low, but with Firefly, as long as your last shot on someone is a crit, you will get a bonus to your reload speed. As far as the handling goes, there are plenty of ways you can handle that. You can use dexterity mods, you can use Ophidians, you can use On Your Mark on Solar Hunter, so on and so forth. So when we talk about tuning exotics, in order to bring them more in line so that they aren't completely broken, you do have to be careful with doing that. Because if you nerf the things that make an exotic special, then it kind of loses its appeal. Like if Ace got too much of a nerf, it would essentially become a pretty average, maybe even below average hand cannon. That's mainly due to the fact that while again the range is excellent at 85, stability and handling are lacking. So we do have to be a little bit careful when we talk about tuning Ace, because we don't want it to immediately become too weak either. So the first thing I would do to bring Ace more in line, make it a little less powerful, is I would actually decrease the number of extra damage rounds that Mori gives you. The reason being that with other damage perks, such as again, Kill Clip, Rampage I believe, Thorn perk, they're on a timer. So you have to make the most of that time in order to take advantage of the damage perk. So with Mori, I would lower the number of extra damage rounds it gives you to from 6 to maybe 3 or 4, because if it's not going to be on a timer, then at the very least you should have to make the most of the extra damage bullets it gives you. But if that turned out to be a little too much and it made Ace a little too weak, there are plenty of options they could do to offset that by a little bit. Such as, let's say that they did lower the number of those extra damage rounds to 3 or 4, they could make it so that if you swap weapons, you don't lose the damage perk like you do currently. They could potentially look at bringing up the stability a little bit or the handling a little bit, keyword being, of course, a little bit. Maybe even the reload speed, so you don't have to rely on Firefly quite as much to get your new magazine in. They could bring up its aim assistance a little bit, maybe its zoom or AE. There are tons of different options here to offset it in case that turned out to be a little too much of a nerf. But again, the idea here is to not offset it too much. So that would mean, of course, you wouldn't want to, say, replace Firefly with, like, Eye of the Storm or something like that. So that's the first thing I would do. The second thing I would do is the radar while aiming down sights. We may want to tune that down as well. I don't think I would remove it completely. What I might do is handle it in a similar way that Invis was recently nerfed on Hunters, where basically when you go invis, you lose some range on your radar. I would probably do the same with Ace. You still have your radar, but the range of that radar does go down a bit. Those things would bring Ace more in line. It would still be a very powerful weapon. It just wouldn't be quite as strong as it is now. And that way, when we inevitably hit another hand cannon meta, Ace will not immediately become a broken weapon. So again, there is a purpose behind this video. Basically, it drives me nuts really pisses me off when I see so many people out there in this community who will not admit something is broken just because it benefits them. And that could be any number of things. There were a lot of people who were doing that with Shatter Dive back when Stasis was the meta after Beyond Light. People have done that with DMT, No Time to Explain, Lemonarch, so on and so forth. At some point, if we ever want Destiny's balance to be at least better than it is now, people have to be willing to admit when something is too strong, even if it benefits them. Which is why, even though yes, I am a Hunter main, I was a big advocate for nerfing Invis, because Invis is a problem, and even as a Hunter main who may use Invis, having to fight against other Invis hunters is still really annoying when it's getting spammed everywhere. The same thing could be said, again, I'm focusing on hunters here because I'm a Hunter main, but the same could be said of Wormhusk, healing grenades to a lesser degree on pretty much all classes, so on and so forth. I'm talking about Ace specifically because I also don't want people in the comments to come in here saying, you know, oh, you just want this nerf because you don't like fighting it, or you don't like the weapon, blah, blah, blah. And I want to do more of this type of video in the future discussing exotics that may be a little too strong. So I figured, what better way to start doing these sorts of videos than talking about my favorite weapon in the game. So that's all for me today, folks. I hope this video made you think. If it did, please let me know in the comments. If you agree with me, let me know in the comments as well. If you disagree with me, let me know. And as always, don't forget to leave me a like, hit that subscribe button with the bell icon, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.